Welcome, everyone. This is the Higher Discourse Podcast. This is the show where we talk about the infinite positive possibilities of our shared future and what's holding us back. In this episode, we're going to talk about structural corruption. Now, what do I mean by structural corruption? Well, let's talk about it. All right, so structural corruption. What does that mean? Think of it like a game that's broken in a way that it doesn't really matter the players, right? So if something is structurally broken, it doesn't really matter what the players do or who the players are. There's something wrong with the game itself in the structure of the game. So even if you fix the players or change the players, it still leaves the game unfixed and still broken. That's what I mean by structural, right? So let's talk about a few games. Let's take chess, for example, right? If a game of chess had all of the pieces of one player on the board, but it was required that all the pieces of the other player were off the board, you would say that that's a broken game. It doesn't make any sense. The game doesn't work right if one of the player's pieces are always off the board and the other player's pieces are always on the board, and it has to stay that way as the rules of the game, right? So take Jenga, right? This game with blocks and trying not to make the blocks fall whenever you pull them out. If every block in a game of Jenga was spherical, it would be a broken game. You couldn't actually functionally do the game. I mean, I could think of these examples all over the place, right? Like, let's say Scrabble. Every letter in the game of Scrabble was a Q, or and there were no other letters in the game. Let's say every card in a poker deck was Joker card, like every card. Let's say every, chip in a game of Connect 4 was the same color for both players, right? These are physical defects in the structure of the games. They wouldn't actually function as intended. And if the games were intended that way, they would basically be non-functional, useless games, essentially. If there's a defect in the structure of the game, then what does it matter who the players are? The game has to get fixed before we have to concern ourselves about the players. It's also important to remember that because it's the game that's broken, it really doesn't matter who those players are. The results of the game will still be the same. The results will continue to repeat themselves over and over again in exactly the same way, because essentially the game is what's causing this repeat of results. The results don't change when the game is functionally, structurally broken. So I want to talk about how our game, our human game, the game we all play, how our system is broken in such a way that it is corrupt as a system. The system itself, it's really irrespective of any individual player. It's not necessarily the player that's corrupt. It's the game itself. It's the system itself. So how are those structures built into our system causing or illustrative of those corruptions, right? Take, for example, corrupt politicians, corrupt judges, corrupt police, corrupt companies. Take, for example, corrupt banks, right? Governments, laws, policies, like all of this corruption, right? Not to mention landlords, right? Like, take all of these things that are structurally part of our system. Where's the corruption coming from? Right. So even when we replace these people, even when we do away with them, or we outvote them, or we get them fired, or we get new people in there, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change where they're coming from. It doesn't change what's wrong. It's not functionally altering or fixing where these problems keep coming from. I mean, you ever notice that it doesn't matter, like, even when these people pass away, we replace them with new people. Either they get fired and we replace them with new people, or they get overthrown and we replace them with new people. The problems still continue, and the next individuals that take these places are just as corrupt, if not more so, and the problem persists, right? People play this game And all the while they blame human nature when in reality, it's a broken game. It's a broken system. And it looks like it's our human nature that's flawed. It's our human nature that's problematic because, first of all, that's an easy excuse, but it's also difficult to see that it's the system at fault because we're all behaving in a certain way, right? If every politician we put in that particular office is corrupt and then we move somebody else out and move that person, move another person in, and then they're corrupt and we do this over and over again, it's easy for us to assume, oh, wow, it looks like that's just how we are. We're corrupt people. That's what we are. We're just corrupt. Human beings are just irredeemably corrupt. Well, I would like to suggest something's wrong with the position, not the player. Something's wrong with the board game, okay, and the pieces and the rules of that board game, not the players. And yes, those pieces are broken in such a way that cause us all to respond to that brokenness in a very similar way. You know, that's because the board game is broken, right? Just because if I touch a hot stove, I scream from getting burned. If you touch a hot stove, you scream from getting burned. It doesn't mean that it's human nature to be burned, right? Like it may be the same response. And that is, you know, arguably something you could attribute to our nature. But that doesn't necessarily mean we should be getting burned in the first place, right? And that's what I'm trying to get at here. Something is wrong with the structure of our system, causing us to scream, but it shouldn't necessarily be burning us in order to make us scream in the first place. We need to get back to the root and back to the cause of what is causing that and why that's happening so that we could all stop getting burned, right? So when you go back and translate that into our system and you put people in these positions, at worst, these people are corrupted, you know, and they replace corrupt people directly. And at best, these people are ineffective. They're inactive. They're inert. They don't do anything to make a difference, a material difference in the people's lives, right? So either way, you're putting someone into this position and it essentially doesn't matter. It essentially has no effective, real world, tangible value. I mean, like, why is that, right? Like over and over again, we see our political and our financial leadership and even our social leadership become basically useless. I mean, just as useless or just as corrupt as their predecessors over and over again, like one of those death loop movies, you know, where the main character sees it going on, but every time they go to sleep and they wake up, everything happens in a loop again. And the ignorant people around him don't seem to notice that they're stuck in some kind of a cosmic loop. They're just going along with the flow, reacting to things as they see them in front of them. No big deal. But the main character of those death loop movies and those death loop stories, they do know and they can recognize something's the matter. We're stuck inside of a giant loop. And that's where the issue comes from. You know, we're stuck in this loop where we just keep shoving new people into these positions and never questioning why crappy people keep coming out of those positions, right? Why these people don't actually solve anything, while nothing is getting fixed in our world, a world that is clearly broken and in need of some fixing. Those things aren't getting fixed. And the leadership and the people we sort of count on to make these changes, these broad, sweeping, authoritative changes, these people end up either ineffective, or they end up corrupt themselves. You know, why is that? Why does the world seem to move so easily in the wrong direction and so, you know, and have such a difficult time moving in the right direction? Why does the world move, you know, faster in the wrong direction and has such a hard time moving fast in the right direction? It moves slowly in the right direction, if and when at all it moves in the right direction. Why? You know, and I'll stop right here to just explain like what I mean by the right direction, right? Like obviously that's a different definition depending on who you're talking to. So I'm going to go ahead and define my terms right now, right? When I say the right direction, I mean like toward human life, toward the positive human experience, right? I mean, like toward the preservation of human life and, towards the expansion of the positive human experience. So let's take a basketball game as an example. This is a pretty comparable example, right? So in a normal basketball game, you have, let's say 5 players on one team and 5 players on the other team and one referee, right? You've got the yellow team and the blue team. And in a normal game, basically it's yellow team versus blue team, and the referees officiate. They oversee and make sure everything's fair, and they make sure everything is going by the rules and doing as it should, and they penalize the individuals who break the rules, etc. Right? So assuming all goes as desired, one team wins over the other team, fair and square. But what if we created a new basketball game, right? Let's follow me with this analogy here. What if we created a new basketball game, and in this basketball game, we change a few things, right? We make a few modifications, right? So let's say in this basketball game, the referees are allowed to play as well. They don't just officiate. They officiate, but they're also allowed to play. And we merge the blue team and the yellow team into one team. And now it's, instead of 5 and 5, blue and yellow, it's 10 green, right? Let's say it's 10 green players on one team and 3 referees on the other team. And the referees actually get to participate in the game. They actually get to play along. Now, when these referees play this game, they're actually allowed to maintain their power and their authority as referees, right? They're actually able to continue in their capacity as referees in this game, right? So let's say one of the referees has the ability, to edit he has editing rights. Let's say he has editing rights and he has the ability to change the rules of the game during the game. That's what one referee has the power and authority to do while he plays. Let's say another referee has the power to enforce those rules. He has the power to, throw out penalties and flags and punish the players, right? And let's say a third referee has the power to validate. He has validation rights. So basically every point he has to validate, every dribble he has to validate. He's got the power to approve or deny every single action on the court, and they have to pass through him to be even considered valid. And these are the 3 referees playing against Team Green, right? So also these 3 refs, out of these 3 refs, any one of them has the ability and the right and the authority to declare the ref team the winners, or the entire green team the losers. They get the final say as to who actually won the game. I'll go ahead and spoil it for you right now. The referees always win in this game of new basketball. They always win. They literally never lose. And Team Green, 100% of the time, always loses the game. Always. So even though the Team Green outnumbers the referee team, it doesn't matter because the referee team outweighs the green team. Okay. So basically, because of the structure of the game, the power granted to the referee team, the authority granted to them by the rules of the game, rules that they control, the referee team will always win, even though it's fewer of them. Even though the green team outnumbers them, they will always win. Because remember, the structure of the game gives them godlike powers as they play the game. While they're playing the game, they possess godlike powers.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
So it doesn't really matter that it's more of Team Green than it is of the referee team. It doesn't matter that they're outnumbered, okay? Because They're playing with the same basketball. They're playing on the same court. They're tracking their score on the same scoreboard. And in this game, power and control decide the winner, not effort, right? On this basketball court, power and control and authority decide the winner, not effort. And power and control will always choose itself, period. So literally, this referee team never loses, ever, not once. They have a perfect winning streak every time they enter into a competition. Okay. They literally always win. So not only would you not watch this basketball game because it would be boring as hell. Okay. Because you already know the outcome before you even tune in. But more to the point, would you even play this game? Who would decide to play this game if they had a choice? Who would decide to even be on that basketball court and on Team Green if they had the choice? Right? Because if you could choose to play, whose team would you choose? Whose team would you choose to play on? The answer is obvious, right? Like anyone would choose to be on the winning team with the most power and the most authority. Okay? Because when you frame things in a context of winners and losers, people will kill themselves or kill each other trying to be on the winning team. They will stop at nothing. They will do whatever it takes to be on the winning team. You know, I'll tell you what else. It's funny how the openings on the referee team are few and far between. They're very rare openings. So people are in that much more of a dire competition to get on that team, to be accepted by that team, to follow every rule and worship that team for their power and control and authority, and identify themselves as people who might someday achieve such greatness as to be allowed on that team. Even though it's obvious that they're cheating. Even though their cheating is legal and it's part of the rules, the referees are still morally and ethically cheating. They're just legally not cheating, if you consider it through the eyes of the law that they write, the rules of the game, the rules of the court that they're in control of. Then, of course, what they're doing is not wrong, officially speaking. And so what ends up happening, people who can't see through the game and through the falsity of it, right? And people who can't understand that something is wrong with this game, where these referees are playing on the same court as us, even though they wield all the power, right? Those folks typically are looking for that opening in that position on the referee team. They want to be a part of the referee team. And it's sad because they chase it sometimes their entire lives, right? And all they need to see is one or two people actually make it to the referee team. And then suddenly that validates their desire to be on the referee team as well, right? Some people say hard work will open up a spot on the referee team. Some people say democracy is what we need to open up a spot on the referee team, right? Like some people say bloodshed is the only way to force ourselves onto the referee team. But see, that's the thing. Like once we open up a spot and once we put a new soul in that spot, does it change the game? That's the question of the year, folks. Does it change the game at all? Because these people are replaced all the time. We might sit here and get upset with the corrupt referees and the way they run the game, but at the same time, they've been replaced before and they will be replaced again. We're not questioning the game itself. Something's broken about the game, right? Once we put these new people in there, are we suddenly seeing massive, giant shifts in the way the world functions, in the way the world works, right? Are we seeing these giant, alterations of our human experience? What's really changing, right? Are the winners suddenly losers now? Are the losers suddenly winners? While the winners are winning, is there any less abuse of power? Does the referee team still have a perfect winning streak? Yes, they do. So it begs the question, what does it matter who we put in these positions and who we put on team referee if it's not going to effectively change the game? It's not tearing down the stadium and renovating the court. It ain't changing the actual power and authority of the positions. It's just interchanging who puts on the jersey, who puts on what jersey. And depending on who puts on what jersey, it's the jersey that generally ends up driving the behavior of the person wearing it, not the other way around. Like, do we even bother to ask ourselves why the shape of the game has losers built into it in the first place? We're busy battling on this basketball court and vying for our position, and sometimes killing each other for these positions. But few of us bother to question the game itself. Few of us bother to slow down and look around and ponder what's wrong with the game itself. You see, what if by creating losers, the game itself is wrong? What if by stratifying the players on the court and the power those players have, what if the game itself is corrupt, right? What if by wasting the talents and the passions and the skills of all the players just because they happen to be on the green team, throwing human lives away, right? What if that makes the game itself evil? Right? Like, no matter how many of us wearing whichever jersey, no matter how many of us die and are replaced, why does it not matter to the game? Why is this game and the next iteration of human beings playing it still just as corrupt? We're going to have to start asking ourselves the tough, systemic questions, right? Because to some degree, we're going to have to start admitting to ourselves that maybe it's not human nature. Maybe it's the game's nature. Something is wrong with the game. Something is wrong with the ball. Something is wrong with the court. Something is wrong with the existence of the scoreboard itself. Right? This is about something wrong with the software, not the user. Something is wrong with the throne, not the king. When the book itself is burning, why are you obsessing and worrying about one character on one page inside that book? The system itself is burning. The system itself is broken. Therefore, the system itself needs to be our focus. So let's bring this analogy, this basketball analogy, back down to reality, right? A little bit closer to reality. In the game of reality, in the game of our real world, our actual system, the new basketball is money, right? The new basketball game we've created and the rules by which we play is money. On the basketball court of money, we are all playing the same game on the same court, right? The same money I get flipping burgers in a restaurant somewhere or pushing boxes in a warehouse, that's the same exact money and the same exact reward as someone who is a judge, someone who is a politician, right? Someone who is a police officer who, is taking sort of like dirty payments under the table, right? We're all sharing in the same exact scoreboard. So the power dynamic, the power difference, the authority difference starts massively skewing toward those with the most, even up to the people who play the game but make the rules at the same time. These are our referees on the same court as us. We're playing on the same money court, alongside the same people who make the rules, the same people who enforce those rules, the people who validate the points and manage the scoreboard. That's what we're doing. These are not separate people in some separate reality outside of the influence of money. They're right here on the same court, making the rules that govern the flow and management of money. Money has this way of sort of leveling all of us onto the same playing field and then drastically giving way more power to those few referees that run the show. And then those referees follow suit. They do exactly what referees do, and they win the game. So it's no surprise that within that corrupt structure, the winners are replaced only by winners, and the losers are replaced by losers. And then the structure, regardless, never ends up changing. Meanwhile, no matter who is in any particular position on that court, the game itself never changes because the sole right to change the game rests in the hands of those winning it. And it's built into the structure of the game that it works that way, right? So even as a winner, you're more or less just a placeholder. You more or less are just in a position that's corrupt, but the corrupt position could have anyone fill that position and it would remain a corrupt position. No matter who ends up dying off, no matter who ends up getting outvoted, no matter who ends up getting overthrown, the position itself, built into the game of basketball, says that only a referee holder can change the game's rules. Only a referee can change the game's rules. So you must become a referee in order to even do that. And more than likely, by the time you become a referee, you're going to reward yourself. You're going to reward yourself with all of the luxuries and the fabulous benefits of being a referee. And that's assuming you were like a very, giving person to begin with. That's assuming you weren't corrupt from the very beginning when you sought that power and control and authority that's granted to you by being a referee. The important thing to remember here is that, again, when you're dealing with a corrupt structure, it literally doesn't matter who is currently filling that corrupt position. We will replace them eventually. It may be violently replacing them. It may be peacefully replacing them. It may be an overthrow or voting someone out, or it may be a coup. It doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really, all the positions you could point to, at least politically, financially, any position of power and authority, we're going to replace these people. It doesn't matter if you're the type of person who just hates on billionaires who are just disgustingly rich. There will be new billionaires. That billionaire you hate will die. You need to ask yourself, why is the next one that replaces that billionaire going to treat his workers just as poorly, right? You need to ask yourself, when you vote that politician out of office, why is the next one definitely guaranteed to be just as ineffective or just as corrupt as the one you voted out? That's what you need to be asking yourself. Think about it. Every single person will be replaced by some new person. And it's very easy to confuse this pattern with human nature. It is extremely easy. But think about it. Every CEO, every billionaire, every president, every judge, every slumlord, every sleazy politician in every office, every lying news pundit, right? Every hateful talk show host that misleads the public that listens to them. Every single one of these people have been replaced and will be replaced by new human beings. Someone else will fill that position and happily put on that referee jersey. Be honest with yourself. Think of any corrupt person you absolutely despise be they a talk show host or a pundit, be they a politician. Think of any corrupt individual you could possibly think of right now and tell me that this person will never die. Think hard enough and you could probably study or remember who was corrupt in that position before them. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out someone will be corrupt in that position after them. And even if it's not the person directly after them, they probably fall into the ineffective category and it'll be the person after them. There's something much deeper we need to be finding here in this problem. There's something much more systemic we need to be understanding as a people if we want to fix this mess. Right? The reason it's so easy for us to fixate on these singular individuals is because we only have one lifetime too. We only have that limited perspective, and we see the same corrupt jerk doing the same corrupt things, right? It's easy for us to fixate on these single individuals because if we only have that individual and they've been corrupt for a lifetime and our lifetime of living has been spent looking at their corruption, it's very easy to see them and mistake them as the sort of embodiment of corruption. Surely, if we just fix them, we'll fix the corruption. Surely, if we can just get them out, then we are literally outing the corruption. Wrong. Literally wrong, literally every time. Why does the corruption come back? Where's it coming from? All right. Like, put yourself in the position of this individual who truly believes that all we need to do is, deal with that one horrible, corrupt person and then all will be fine.
Gee Willikers, it looks like we just need to remove that bad person from the position and then replace them with a good person and then all will be right with the world. It's so obvious.
Like we do that just over and over again. We do the same song and dance every single time. And the core corruption never quite goes away. Like, think about it from the referee's perspective, right? Think about it from the referee's perspective, who's got full control of the game and its rules, who is winning, period. Who's definitely succeeding at the game. Look at it from their perspective and then ask yourself, why isn't it that every public office position is temporary? Theoretically, that would make more sense that you go and you serve and then you leave that position. You go and you represent and then you leave, right? Why isn't every public office position temporary by design? Why aren't term limits built in, right? Theoretically, it just makes more sense. Like, if a person was a cook at a restaurant and then he ran for office and got elected in and held temporary office that he knew was a temporary position, right? And while he's in office, he has to make decisions that generally affect other cooks, right? Then theoretically, he'd be a lot more careful about what he's doing while he's in office, right? He knows he's a cook now. He knows he's making decisions that affect cooks. And then he knows when he leaves office, he will be a cook again, right? So generally that individual is going to be more careful, more considerate, and more fair to cooks when he's making his decisions. Why? Because he knows when he's done with office, when he's out of there, he's going to return to being a cook. And he'll be subject to all the laws he created. He'd be subject to all the rules and the decisions he decided upon, which makes the most sense to take that individual and put them in that position temporarily so that it's understood you are going to be subject to these same rules and experiences and laws. Your human experience will be the same as the people you are representing. The real point of me bringing it up is, why don't we have something like that? Why don't we talk about something like that? Why isn't it on the table, right? to be voted on and passed or not passed? Why isn't it even on the agenda of these politicians? See, because these politicians, they understand. They can confidently screw people over because they're not necessarily going to be put in the same positions where they got to deal with their own decisions and deal with their own laws and deal with their own problems. The things that they're in charge of, they actually get to make the rules that place them just a little bit above that problem, so they no longer have to deal with it. Right? It's kind of like they say, like, we the people. Well, we the people are subject to those laws and those rules and whatnot. But those politicians and in our leadership, they are not necessarily, quote, the people, unquote, anymore. Because if they had to deal with the same struggles and the same rules and the same laws, if they had to deal with the same sort of problems and issues, if they remained a cook after they help officiate and make decisions about cooks while in temporary office, they would make decisions that were more democratic, that were more egalitarian, that were more positive and giving, and did better for the regular everyday folks to change and improve their positive experience. But they don't. And I don't think enough people challenge the real reason why they don't. Because even though they claim to be us and they claim to be representatives of us, we're Team Green, and they are not. They have power and authority to change the rules and alter the game, but they don't. They're Team Referee, right? They're a different team wearing a different jersey. And they have done that because that's the world they were born into. I'm not saying they are naturally on a different team. I'm saying they were people on Team Green at one point, probably, and they made a choice to go get on Team Ref, to join the other team. But that doesn't necessarily mean they are somehow going to do anything for Team Green that still results in anything other than the ref team winning. They will do lots of for show bullshit things, but none of those things are going to change who wins the game. Team referee will still win the game. They will not give up their winning streak, and once they're on that team, usually they choose to stay on that team for life. For the most part, they end up on that team for life, right? So once you're on a superior team with superior power, like every human mind, you're going to identify with that team. You're going to enjoy that team's advantages. You're going to start feeling loyalty to that team. That's your team. They're your people. You're on team power. You're on team authority. You're on team top of the hierarchy. You know what I mean? So why would you use that power to declare yourself the loser? Why would you share in the victories and break a very long tradition of a winning streak? A winning streak that started before you, a winning streak that you fawned after and wanted for yourself, earned your place on that team through whatever means you managed to do so. And then you got on the team of the referees. You're not going to be the first one to break a winning streak. A winning streak that got you where you are, keeps you where you are. You're not going to be the first one to say, all right, you guys, we should really lose this next round. Give one to the green team, right? Famous examples of this would be like here in the US where like politicians, give themselves certain advantages. They don't give the people they represent. They actively choose not to give these same advantages to the people they serve and represent. Think about it, right? You don't control a politician's salaries. They control their own salaries, right? You don't get to say what they make and what they don't. You don't get to modify and judge and change their income based on their performance, right? You don't have that power. They hold the power to change and modify their own salaries, right? B, many of them maintain a very respectable and comfortable salary in the first place, right? During their term, during their time in office, they have a very respectable salary and certainly pension when their terms are over or when they retire or whatever, right? They have pretty good money by most people's standards sitting around, as an income while they're in office. And like I said, many of them get pensions as well. Whereas for the American people, like most pensions don't, they barely exist anymore. Right. And C, let's not forget these politicians give themselves full, complete, total healthcare coverage, like with top tier doctors in medical care because they can afford it, right? How can they afford it? Because of taxpayer dollars, the very same taxpayers that these politicians won't give the same access to healthcare and single payer, ease like every other first world country, right? It's obvious they won't pass these benefits, these basic things that they have. These are basic luxuries they enjoy, right? In their positions as referees, in their positions of power and authority, but they won't share. Now, why won't the referees share the winnings with Team Green? Gee, I wonder, right? Financially, again, we're on the same basketball court. If money is the court, if money is the game, we're all on the same field, the same court, playing at the same time with the very people who control this stuff, the rules of the game. Does that make sense in any other scenario? I don't think it does, right? So let's go back over A, B, and C and look at how these same politicians won't pass benefits that are specifically to help the people they allegedly serve and represent. Right. So let's go back to A. They grant themselves very high salaries from taxpayer money. Meanwhile, the people are begging for a livable wage. Like, they're protesting and they're upset and they're all over the news and they're struggling across, they're doing campaigns trying to get a livable wage. Still haven't gotten one. Right. And whatever they get, when and if they get something, it will never be quite enough because that's how money works. But these same politicians are using taxpayer dollars to give themselves that very same thing, a more than livable wage and comfort at that. So let's take a look at B, right? These politicians grant themselves lifetime salaries or pensions from taxpayer money, right? Meanwhile, the people are begging for a UBI or a universal basic income to serve as some kind of cushion for unemployment and things like that. Something that's a sort of baseline that'll help people not always fall into poverty because the system as it is a little bit slanted toward extreme poverty if you make one misstep on this sort of minefield of a system. And a universal basic income, people are wanting to kind of give some sort of insurance from that particular problem, give some sort of insulation from that problem. Meanwhile, these politicians who won't do it are also the same politicians who have a regular stable income from taxpayer dollars, literally like people are asking for, right? Let's go what I said with C, right? Let's go and talk about that. They grant themselves single payer healthcare here in the United States. Single payer. Why? Because it's the taxpayer dollars doing all the heavy lifting. And they literally grant it to themselves, even though I believe I recently heard 60% of the American people want a single payer healthcare system. But they don't care. The politicians don't care what the people want. They're on Team Green while the politicians are on the referee team, the team of power and authority. And that team always wins. So like I said before with those three questions, why isn't every politician or judge subject to term limits? Why can't you give them a pay cut if their performance is lacking, right? The performance you voted them in or elected them to perform, right? Why are their positions on the basketball court as referees permanent, where they can plant their roots down and just hang out for a lifetime, sucking in the benefits of being a referee? And I hope it's obvious by now that because We're within a corrupt structure. When we're on that basketball court, the game itself is corrupt and the rules are corrupt. In that, any changes that happen, any alteration to the rules of the game have to first be approved by and go through the very same beneficiaries of that structural corruption. These are the same people who benefit from it being broken. They are the ones who have the final say on whether we change it and fix it to something else or something better. That's what's broken about it. So no one you put in that position is going to choose that. It seems obvious, like it makes perfect sense. It seems extremely obvious. And yet it's what we're doing. The winners make the rules, and the rules make the winners in a closed loop. And that's why no matter how many people manage to get into and infiltrate that loop, far more people fail to in a lifetime. Far more people never get in on the inside of that loop. And the ones who do are useless or corrupt or corrupted, right? If you are the beneficiary of something that serves you and you control that something, then naturally you're going to safeguard it, you're going to protect it, you're going to conserve it, and you're going to generally do your best to leave it unchanged. So let's take a step aside real quick from the basketball analogy, right? Let's just do a quick little thought exercise, right? Let's say for a second that there was a corruption at your bank, like not even a person corruption, right? Let's say there was a glitch at your bank and there was a glitch in their software, and suddenly that glitch resulted in a $1 million deposit to your bank account, right? So so this isn't a question of whether or not you'll tell anybody or a question like that. Well, not yet. It's not that question yet, but just follow me on this one, right? So the bank sees this massive deposit into your account, right? And it raises alarms, and they start an investigation. You know, you got this sudden $1 million influx of cash sitting in your checking account when your previous deposits showed, you know, who knows what you make per week, right? 2,000 a week or something. Let's just make up a number. So you would normally make it 2,000 a week, and the bank sees that you suddenly have $1 million deposit from just an unknown source, and it raises alarms and causes an investigation, right? So let's say this bank finds nothing wrong or illegal on their end, right? And so they literally call you, the recipient of this $1 million, and says, hey, listen, you know, do you see anything wrong on your end? Is there anything that you've done wrong or illegal that caused this? And obviously you're going to answer no. Right? You're going to say, no, I didn't do anything wrong, and there's nothing wrong on this end. And so then the bank says, well, you know, I guess we'll just consider the $1 million legitimate. You know, we'll just consider it legitimate right now. Good for you. And then they let you know that, hey, the only other possibility, if we don't see anything wrong on our end and you didn't do anything wrong and nothing illegal on your end, they tell you that maybe the only possibility possibly left to consider is there might be some sort of software glitch that caused this problem. But they also confide in you and tell you, you know, we don't really have the expertise to find out whether or not it was a software issue or not, a glitch in the software, right? And so let's say, like, this is a genius bank, all right? Let's say at this point you tell the bank, Well, actually, I'm a professional software engineer, an analyst. I could totally, look at those software lines of code and examine them for you and see if I can find a glitch or something that, just so you can be extra comfortable that you don't have a software problem, you know? So, so here's what's funny. Like, what if the bank, in response to you saying this, says, yes, you're hired, when can you start? Right. Right. Like, so this is the funniest bank of all time in this scenario. Right. But just follow me. Right. If you can convince them to hire you, what if you convince them to hire you at a salary of like $30,000 a week, right? To do this job of like looking over their software and checking on things and making sure that their software isn't glitchy, right? So then on top of them being willing to hire you for $30,000 a week, you also negotiate and get them to understand that you only need 1 hour a week to do this job. Right? Follow me on this thought exercise. You are now in a position negotiating your employment with this bank, the very bank that just experienced a glitch that gave you $1 million. Now, you don't know why you got this million, but you are curious and you are talking to these people casually, really barely even serious. And when you offer to do this analysis job on their software, at $30,000 per week as a salary, they agreed. So you're counting your lucky stars that this is the world's most genius bank. And you go ahead and, like I said, you convince them at $30,000 per week, you only need 1 hour a week to do your job. You further convince them that you only need to do this job remotely through your laptop, which basically means literally from anywhere in the world, by logging in for an hour and looking over their software code, right? This is your lucky day, by the way. I hope you realize in this scenario, right? So let's say you start your job, right? You convince these people you're already a millionaire by some happenstance, right? You convince these people to now make you an extremely highly paid 6-figure income individual who doesn't have to do anything or go anywhere to do your job remotely. And let's say when you sit down and they push the software to your laptop and you can see their code, let's say you actually do see the glitch in the system that paid you the $1 million. You find it, right? But here's the thing, you find the glitch and you find out when you look at the code, this glitch is recurring. So it's about to pay you a new $1 million in 5 days, and it will continue to pay you a new $1 million every month indefinitely. This is what you see when you sit down and you crack open your laptop and you look at that bank code, the software of their code. Now we get to the point where I ask, what would you do in this scenario? Right. I didn't want to just give the whole, you found a briefcase full of $1 million. This is much more, important that we ask, what would you do if you held the power to fix this problem? That's what this question is about. That's what this thought exercise is about. What would you do if you possessed in your hands a ridiculously high-paying job, ridiculously easy and laid back? It's a vacation of a lifestyle, and you have a massive $1 million a month accident that continues happening, and you're the sole individual in charge of fixing that problem. What would you do? That's what I want to ask. What would you do? We're going to name this bank. Let's name this bank Genius Bank, right? And let me go ahead and spoil it for you. The average person, let's just say it's a dude. The average person is going to take that $1 million a month and not fix the glitch. He's also going to likely let Genius Bank sit there and pay him $30,000 a week as agreed upon. And all he has to do in exchange is log in for an hour every week and look over the code while he takes this massive, massive yearly salary and this even more massively beneficial problem, glitch, that's paying him what the bank will assume is a legitimate $1 million a month that they won't question. Why? Because the maximum amount of questioning this bank is going to do is that they're just going to hire a guy to look over the code and make sure there's no glitch. Who's the guy they hired? The very same guy who's getting a random $1 million from a possible glitch that might exist. So we should definitely, as a Genius Bank, hire the guy who's getting the benefit to be the guy who oversees fixing a possible problem, diagnosing and fixing a possible problem. And we'll just totally let him be the guy who's on that job. That way we did our job of getting a guy on the job, right? What individual wouldn't just kick back and enjoy this incredible, incredible benefit package from Genius Bank? I bet there's a rare individual you will talk to that would not take advantage of this situation given to them by Genius Bank on complete accident. Now, what's so funny about this story, and this just amuses me to no end, is that it may seem impossibly stupid, right? It just, on the face of this scenario, this thought exercise, it seems incredibly stupid beyond belief to a point where it's impossible to take it seriously, that any bank in the world would be dumb enough to do what Genius Bank did in this scenario. But what's tragic and frightening about this story is, ladies and gentlemen, we're the bank in this scenario. We are the bank. It's us. Okay? We hired someone to oversee and govern their own power, to edit and assess their own rules, to manage, to balance the scoreboard that we all share, and to fix the very problems that employ them. We hired them for that job. We're the bank, folks. Right? Like, this is what's tragic about that thought exercise. We're the bank. Why are we the bank? We hired this individual to fix a system whereby it remaining broken is the very thing that keeps the referee jersey on his chest. So does that referee have an incentive to fix the system, to fix the game? Or does that referee have every incentive to leave the game broken? Because by the game being broken, it gives the referee purpose and power, authority and control. Do you see the problem? I'll reiterate, why do we need to think about and talk about structural corruption rather than worrying about violence and stuff like I just talked about, right? Why is our primary job to ponder this issue? Well, think about it like any structure, right? To answer that question, I'd say think about it like any structure, right? An old structure that's been standing and sort of gathering dust for decades, that structure needs maintenance crews. It needs people to maintain it and upkeep it, right? It needs a maintenance crew to keep it alive, right? But new structures need architects, need designers. New structures need us to start thinking and planning and designing. And to be an architect, to be a designer, you have to understand. That's the value of thinking first, talking first, understanding first. You have to be good at the job you're about to do. The job of being an architect, the job of being a designer of the next world. right? So today, you and I may be the maintenance crew of this world, right? But we are the designers and the builders and the architects of the next world. And when we're busy and when we're about the work and about the job of developing new worlds or new systems, new structures, as we puzzle over and build tomorrow, we have to be careful. This is not about blaming other people and other corrupt people and other corruptions and pointing the finger. We are the ones in charge of tomorrow. We have to be careful in the new systems we build, the new systems we design, right? When we draw up the structures and the blueprints of tomorrow, of the next century, we have to be careful not to repeat the same mistakes of our ancestors, not to repeat the same design flaws when we are drawing up the plans for tomorrow. That's what's important for us right now. That's the work we need to be about and we need to be busy doing. We have to be careful and we have to be mindful not to build these corruptions into the structure that we hope to be sustainable. Right? We can't build corruption into those structures and then expect the people within those structures we've built to not succumb to that corruption. Right? You can't build a house out of beehives and then expect the people living inside not to get stung. I believe we can do better, and I believe together we will do better. All right, and that's it for this episode. I want to say real quick on the at the end here that, I used in this episode, I used politicians a lot. I used politicians and the examples of politics to talk about structural corruption, but if you pay attention there, you can find a lot of these same design errors, these same flaws all across our system, right? Like there's a lot of other examples of structural corruption, as I've talked about it here. I would like to know if you could spot any other signs, any other examples of structural corruption. If you can, let me know. Send me an email or shoot me a tweet. My contact information at this point is still the same as the last episode. I haven't really updated any contact info, but I do plan to have a website and things eventually, but we'll see. But for now, you can contact me at Higher Discourse on Twitter, or you can send me an email with any comments or questions at higherdiscoursepodcast@gmail.com. That's higherdiscoursepodcast@gmail.com.
Phenomenal cosmic power! Is mine to command, to confront. The power, the absolute power. Phenomenal cosmic